Please be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, dear candidate. Good morning, dear paranymphs, members of the family, friends, colleagues of Erik Schaap, hopefully later on Dr. Erik Schaap, because that's the reason why we are here, and I hereby open this academic ceremony in which Erik Schaap will defend the academic thesis Scouting for Knowledge, Exploring Resource Acquisition for Innovation through Web Data Analysis. Erik, may I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis. The floor is yours.
Dear Pro-Rector, dear committee members, dear friends, family, and colleagues. For the next 10 to 15 minutes, I would like to take you along on a journey. And that's the journey of Sam. Sam is a young, ambitious man, full of high hopes and dreams in his life. But there's only really one thing that he can think about all the time, and that's sports. Sam is a big sports enthusiast, like practicing different sports, and goes to any major sports events whenever he can. Naturally, at some point in his life, Sam decided to turn his passion into his profession, and he founded a startup called Blue Sheep. You can think of it sort of like an Airbnb, but for sports experiences. So instead of making a booking for a rental abroad, you make a reservation for a truly unique sport experience. Sam, of course, hopes that his startup can evolve into a major company, be a huge success, and attract millions of users. Yet when he gets started, he has more questions than answers. He wonders, where can I get advice and help that I need to grow my startup? How should I build my team? How can I get funding? And ideally, of course, fast. And where can I find external partners or experts that can help me out? To find answers to his questions, Sam goes to the one place where I think many of us go when we have unanswered questions, the World Wide Web. And as he starts searching for answers to his questions, he realizes that there is a lot of information available online on startups, entrepreneurship, and much more. So much so that Sam finds himself drowning in an ocean of information. Yet amidst the drowning, Sam discovers an online community called Startups on Reddit. It's a community with more than 1.8 million users, including founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and many more. Sam thinks to himself, that's the place where I can get the help and advice that I need right now. And so he decides to join the community and become an active member of it. What he does is he starts posting questions, but he also answers to other people's comments and posts. And in doing so, he builds something what we like to call bridging social capital, which means that Sam essentially bridges across otherwise disconnected groups. The advantage that this has is that Sam can get access to very diverse knowledge sources, which is particularly important for his startup Blue Sheep. Because you see, Blue Sheep is not just a tech platform, right? It's more than that. It's marketing, it's design, it's tourism, and of course, sports. While being active within the startups community, Sam at some point comes across this thread called Share Your Startup. It basically invites users to tell others about their startup, tell them what they do, which products or services that they offer, and who their target customers are. Intrigued by the opportunity, Sam also wonders whether disclosing his startup affiliation might have an effect on the knowledge exchanges between him and other users. And well, social exchange theory tells us that by sharing the fact, revealing the fact that Sam is actually a startup founder, he's more likely to be perceived more credible and more serious about his entrepreneurial endeavors. This might attract then more knowledgeable respondents that can give him targeted advice. Yet at the same time, these very respondents are founders and entrepreneurs themselves. So they might see Sam as a competitor and then be reluctant to actually share insights. To answer that question, Sam decides to run a little study. He looks at startup founders who have disclosed their startup affiliation and what happens to their advice-seeking behavior, but also advice receiving from the other side. And what he sees is a post-disclosure paradox. Startup founders that reveal their identity are more likely to ask for more advice after disclosure, yet they receive significantly less advice in return. And what is even more worrying for Sam is that founders that disclose their startup affiliation and on top of that have high bridging social capital, something he has been building in the last few weeks and months, get penalized the most and suffer the most from revealing their startup affiliation, especially with respect to directive advice. Naturally, Sam decides, I'm not sharing my startup, and instead he keeps on asking more generic questions. For example, what should a startup's first hires look like? And it works. He gets a lot of responses from many different users, but he's also a little bit puzzled by those responses, because everybody seems to be suggesting something different, right? One user says, it's all about the years of experience that potential employees have within the job or an industry. Another user again says, it's not so much about experience, but really the knowledge that they can bring to the table. And then a third user again says, forget about knowledge, it's all about the skills and abilities to execute tasks and whether you have the motivation to do so. Puzzled by these different responses, Sam again tries to find his answers on the web. This time he goes looking on Glassdoor. Glassdoor is an online platform where users can share reviews about their current or former employers, including recruitment interview questions. And it's exactly those interview questions that Sam wants to tap into. Using natural language processing, he wants to identify, do startups prioritize knowledge, skills, or other characteristics among early employees when they start hiring? And what he sees are two distinct ways of how startups build their teams early on. In the first pattern, the recruitment strategy focuses a lot on skills and motivations that early employees can bring into the team. In the second pattern, while initially balancing across all three dimensions, so knowledge, skills, and motives, it later on focuses predominantly on knowledge. Intrigued by his findings, Sam wonders, is one of these patterns actually superior to the other? Should I follow one of these particular recruitment strategies? And so what he does is he augments and complements the Glassdoor data with information from Crunchbase, an online platform that holds a lot of information on startups' performance. And what he sees is that startups that follow this first recruitment pattern, so focus on skills and motives rather than knowledge, actually double their chances of receiving early stage financing, and on top of that, do that on average 1.5 years faster than their counterparts. Of course, Sam then decides to follow this recruitment strategy and starts hiring people. One of the first people that he brings into the team comes up with a truly new idea. He says, what if we use augmented reality to show optimal skiing lines or routes when rock climbing to our users on Bluesheep? Sam knows that this is truly a new-to-market innovation, something that hasn't been done before, yet he also knows that it surpasses the capabilities and resources of Bluesheep at this point. And so he needs to find external help. One source of external help is direct partners, establish collaborations with other companies. And while the advantages of direct partners is very evident to Sam, he wonders, should I also care about my partner's partners? And even beyond that, should I care about my partner's partners? Because ultimately, they also represent potential knowledge inflows to Bluesheep that can be beneficial, right? So it might be worthwhile to look at them. And on top of that, when we talk about knowledge inflows and outflows, how connected these partners are might impact how easily that knowledge flows throughout the network and ultimately into Bluesheep, right? And so he again decides to run a study combining web data with more traditional innovation research methods. What he does is he web scrapes the contents of the websites of these potential partners and partners and beyond, and uses the hyperlinks, so the links that you click to get from one website to another, to map the network between those companies. On top of that, he uses the web texts that he finds on these websites to measure how similar the knowledge of partners and partners are to that of Bluesheep at this point. He then complements the web data that he has collected with information from the Community Innovation Survey, a survey that asks companies whether they have introduced a product innovation in the 3 years prior, including those new-to-market innovations that are truly something new. Sam then uses this approach to evaluate two potential networks that he might join. And he realizes that both of these networks hold equally dissimilar knowledge to that of Bluesheep at this stage, which can be beneficial for new-to-market innovation because it requires the recombination of otherwise distant knowledge. But when he looks at how connected these networks are, he realizes that actually the network with less connections is favorable to new-to-market innovation. Because you see, when we have a high level of connections, knowledge disseminates easily across all members. but that leads to a situation of everybody knows what everybody knows, which ultimately means that the advantage that you might gain from having access to distinct knowledge will not materialize. And so Sam decides to join that less connected network. Yet external partners are not the only source of external knowledge and help to bring into a company. You can also bring in individuals, true experts. And that is what Sam is looking for, an augmented reality research expert to back the development of this new-to-market innovation, Vertigo AR, by academic research. And he again starts his search on the web. And he quickly realizes that there is a ton of augmented reality research being published right now. But this time, instead of drowning in an ocean of information and information overload, Sam decides to make use of his natural language processing skills to uncover otherwise hidden topics across the entire AR research landscape. And there's three main topics that he finds. The first one is mostly about digital tourism, cultural heritage research. The second one is about marketing, consumer behavior, and business, while the third one is all about education, learning, and training. Having uncovered these different topics, Sam then goes on to compute a so-called topic activity index. So basically just looking at how much each individual academic, potential AR research expert that he wants to bring in, contributes to each of these research topics. Overlaying that topic activity index with a very classical co-authorship network, he realizes, well, the experts that I'm looking for and that I want to bring in are definitely out there, yet the issue is that they are not talking to each other. Because you see, the AR research landscape is very fragmented into silos, where there is a lot of connections happening within those silos, but not across them. At the end of this journey, having uncovered all of these different patterns by using web data in combination with traditional research methods, Sam asks, how many innovations are we actually missing out on because we don't see those patterns right now? And this question pertains to the fundamental challenge that this thesis tries to tackle and contribute to. You see, in today's society, where we are more connected than ever before, the challenge is not so much about information scarcity. Quite the opposite, actually. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, academics, companies, and investors that are drowning in information overload. The true challenge today is pattern blindness. Why can we not see the knowledge that is already out there and that can help us to drive innovation, startups, entrepreneurship, and growth? This thesis suggests that with the right tools that combine modern web data analytics with more traditional innovation research methods, we can all become better knowledge scouts. Because at the end of the day, knowing how to web scrape might be knowledge, yet understanding which digital signals truly reflect impactful knowledge flows is true wisdom. That's the wisdom that Sam has gained at the end of his journey, and that's also the contribution of this thesis. With that, I give the word back to the prorector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erik, for your clean, well-structured presentation. And the written piece, of course, is well-structured. But I'm certain Berta Di Palma will know this. La vita è troppo disordinata per essere vissuta tranquillamente. We will not allow you to rest or live tranquil for the next 45 minutes because we have an opposition. And the opposition is there to further increase the quality of your work and will be opened by the chair of the assessment committee, Professor Dr. Jos Lemming.
Dear candidate, dear Erik, it was indeed a pleasure to read your thesis, very interesting topics, different research methods, and a bit contrary to what the pro-rector introduced about the time, the next 45 minutes. I would like to ask one of your paranymphs, and you thought you had a quiet job today, but one of you, to read Stelling Statement 2 aloud.
Mm-hmm. Apparently I do not. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, well prepared.
Which one?
Yes.
Which one would you like?
Stelling 2.
2? Okay.
Yes.
Startups prioritizing skills and motivation over domain knowledge in early hires recognize that expertise depreciates while the adaptability of hires appreciates.
Thank you very much. Now back to the candidate, Erik. Yeah, so the conclusion is that expertise depreciates over time then, and then adaptability of hires appreciate, right? And this is also what you presented in your introduction. Could it be the other way around? Because common sense could be that in the beginning expertise is important, and later on the adaptability, because there's a lot of things that need to be organized and concretized. Mm-hmm. So could you shed some light on this conclusion?
Yeah, highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words, and also thank you very much for your question. I think it's a very valid and important question. And to be frank with you, I think the answer is yes, but we need to put things into context, right? So the context that we are currently looking at in this study is startups that have not yet received early stage financing, so that are very much at the beginning and so far probably living off what we like to call love money, so money that they have received from friends, family, and people that believe in them early on, right? At the same time, we're also looking at early employees that you're bringing in. So the knowledge that you were referring to is definitely important, but it might be incorporated within the founders at the beginning, right? The people that start these companies. Because I think that the founders are truly important to set the vision, to identify a gap in the market that needs to be filled, and to identify how you can fill that gap. And I think that requires a lot of knowledge. But then, when it comes to receiving financing and early stage funding, you want to bring in people that can help you to get there quickly. And quickly means that the environment is very uncertain, it is highly volatile, and so they will need to execute. But there are certainly cases where you would prefer to bring in people that are knowledgeable. And I can think of, for example, industries where regulations are very strict, where you need experts to be able to even develop products in the first place, right? At the same time, there might be academic spin-offs, which is mostly more knowledgeable people that you're trying to bring in. So I think that there are situations in which, yes, knowledge might be preferred over skills and motives, yet I think that the context is very much dependent, and it also depends on what you have in the company in the first place. Because, for example, if we look at pattern 1, which prioritizes skills and motives, it doesn't mean that they don't look at knowledge at all, right? It just shows that towards the end, towards getting closer to receiving early stage financing, these startups tend to prioritize skills and motives rather than knowledge. But it doesn't mean that they don't bring in any knowledge in the first place. And sometimes, ideally, of course, you want to bring in people that have all three. Yet, by not having this financing yet, these startups might be resource constrained and don't have the financial capabilities to actually do so, right? So I think there's two pieces to the answer. That is, first of all, yes, there are situations where knowledge is preferred. And second, it's not only about skills and motives, it is also about knowledge, but prioritizing skills and motives can help you get to financing faster.
Okay, this helps. This puts things in perspective, and also you explained the context. So I have a second question, and I was doubting to pose it right now instead of in the second round, but this is about your job at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. So the soccer analytics, or analytics, athletics analytics, Red Bull is your employer. Mm-hmm. And I would like to draw a comparison between an innovation team, innovation process, innovation patterns, in an innovation context like you studied in your dissertation, and a football team, a soccer team. Mm-hmm. Because a soccer team has players, there are rules, and there's also an ultimate goal, and that's a goal, right? So the performance is how many scores does your team achieve during the play, during the match. My question is about the success of soccer teams, because I came across a study in which the anomalies during the game in the network were predicting the scores. Mm-hmm. And I was really asking myself when I was reading your network analysis, did you come across anomalies as well? And could you think of anomalies being even more important than a well-structured network, including the knowledge, including to try to describe what is going on? But the anomalies could play sort of a role there, mm-hmm. where suddenly a financer from different part of the world, or some other ideas break in. So can you reflect on this situation?
Yeah. Thank you very much for your question, and I like the comparison to what I do right now in the soccer analytics. And I definitely think that there are situations in which anomalies within the network structure can be more beneficial than following, let's say, the standard pattern. And I think that there are two situations, and I would like to use your soccer comparison as a starting point. Essentially, I think with all the information and data that is available today, be it web data, but also more traditional data such as patent data, for example, which is also often used to map networks. With that being available today, we're basically in a situation that is more democratized to analyze these network structures, right? So everybody has that information available, can look at what networks look right now, and kind of follow that patterns. But if you then want to stand out, you will have to do something differently. You will have to be the anomaly, right? To be really, truly innovative compared to what everybody else is doing. And I can imagine a similar scenario in the soccer paper that you mentioned. If every team is following the standard pattern, if every team is using the same models to predict which network structure, which team structure leads to a goal, then at some point we are nullifying the advantage of having access to that information, right? And then you need to be creative and think of situations of how can we twist and turn the network structure, create an anomaly to have a slight advantage above everybody else. And historically speaking, I think in sports there have been situations that have done that, right? There have been football teams in the past that have gone out and have focused on specific skills to bring into the team, no matter how good, no matter how bad that player is, but if he or she has that one specific skill and they know that skill can increase the likelihood of goals, they bring that person in. That is not how most teams operate. They look also a lot at personality and the full package right now. But if you don't have the resources available for getting the full package, you need to do things a little bit differently. And so yes, I think that anomalies, especially in situations where there's high transparency on what the networks look like, and that is something that I try to contribute to with this thesis by showing how web data can be used to reveal otherwise hidden patterns and network structures. And by having that transparency, you might need anomalies to stand out. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And although Jos didn't need introduction, Jos holds the chair of Marketing and Service Innovation at Maastricht University. The opposition will be continued by Associate Professor at the Department of Marketing and Supply Chain Management, Dr. Anne ter Braak. The floor is yours, Anne.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, dear Eric, I want to first compliment you on writing a dissertation consisting of 4 distinct but complementary chapters, using different types of web data and also different analytical techniques to process them. So that is very impressive. My question is about chapter 4. And in chapter 4, you use a sample of firms across many, actually 13 different sectors. And in my research, I often look at the retail sector, where retailers and brand manufacturers are the active innovators. This would also be one of the sectors where Red Bull currently is active in. So my question actually is twofold. First, do you expect your findings of chapter 4 to hold when you would only look at the retail sector? Because I know you have them in your data. Or if not, how would you expect your results to change? And then second, looking at the different sectors in table 3 in chapter 4, can you perhaps think of a sector characteristic that could influence the impact of the variables in your model? In other words, can you think of a sector characteristic that could play a moderating role?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words, and also thank you very much for your question. I want to tackle first the first part of your question about whether I would expect the same findings within the retail sector specifically. I just want to repeat the main findings, which is this inverted U-shaped curve, right, where very low density is not beneficial to innovation and very high density is also not so much beneficial. And while I'm not an expert in the retail industry as you do, I could expect some form of this curve to manifest itself. The reason being that if I think about the very two, well, first of all, I think the retail sector is in itself already a connected sector. just because of the industry and the practice. But I think that too many connections can also be detrimental, because if everybody knows where you're getting resources from, where, for example, if you take the example of Red Bull, if you know where you're getting your raw materials for the Red Bull energy drink from, that transparency can be harmful, right? Because essentially, if another company, and I don't want to name any competitors, but let's take Coca-Cola, for example. If Coca-Cola knows Red Bull is ordering its raw materials from this particular place, and they somehow also start collaborating with this particular supplier, get insights in one way or another into current orders, Red Bull might lose its competitive advantage, right? And so a situation of very high connectivity can be detrimental as you lose the competitive advantage that you might have to develop your product. While at the same time, I think, as I said, the retail sector is already a connected sector, so I could imagine that there is some sort of bell-shaped curve. Now, coming to your second question, if I interpret it correctly, it's about potential moderators within based on industry characteristics that might play a role here. And I definitely think that is the case. If we take the retail sector that is already a connected sector and compare it, for example, a sector where intellectual property is much more important, can be computers, can be engineering. I think that in those sectors, generally speaking, companies might be more reluctant to start establishing many connections, to integrate into networks that are already densely connected, because of this risk of knowledge spillovers. And intellectual property being so important in those particular sectors will definitely start shaping the curve, shifting the point where density is sort of optimal for innovation, more towards the left, towards less density than high density. So I definitely think, because not only this particular chapter, but also the whole thesis is very much about bringing in new knowledge, distinct knowledge, protecting that knowledge will definitely play a role in this. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, and I do have a bit of a follow-up. So is there any way, like, how could you have tested that with the current data that you have?
I think one way, certainly not the ideal way, would be to look at interaction effects with industry. But because we're already testing this interaction effect with cognitive distance, we didn't want to go for three-way interaction because it gets complicated to explain and also analyze. Another possibility would be to look at how high the frequency or the ratio of patent applications are in particular industries. Because as I said, it's very much about protecting the knowledge, avoiding these outbound spillover rents, right? And one way to protect those is to patent the data, to patent the information. And so if we look at the patenting ratio within different industries, that definitely could have been a moderator, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We continue the opposition by giving the floor to Dr. Milad Abbasi-Harofte, Associate Professor of Innovation and Applied Data Science at Aalborg University Business School, Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear candidate, dear Eric, I enjoyed reading your thesis, and I especially appreciate your innovative use of alternative source of data, namely deliberately disclosed web data, while ensuring methodological rigor and analytical depth. I believe your work makes a timely and valuable contribution to the emerging field of web AI, digital layer, in innovation studies and business analytics. That brings me to my first question related to Chapter 4. While I agree with you and with your general claim that web data is a valuable source of information, my understanding is that it can be also quite noisy. For instance, companies may greenwash on their web pages or easily create hyperlinks, as it's far less costly than establishing collaborative ties with other firms, such as joint research or co-patenting activities. I'm curious, how did you address this potential noise in your data?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words, and thank you for your question. Also, thank you for the research and work that you have done in this field. I think anyone who stands here is standing on the shoulders of others, and you're definitely one of them. Now, to answer your question, I think that there is always certain ways to handle noise within data. There is more methodological, technical ways, of looking at potential outliers that don't fit the norm, but there is also ways of complementing the data that you have available, triangulating it with other data sources to check what are you actually seeing here and make sense of it. And there are certain steps that we took with this hyperlinks approach. Some of them have it made into the manuscript that you have read. Some of them have been done before or after. The work is not finished yet. But one of them, for example, is that we looked at what we're seeing is this only B2B, because we're only looking at in-sample hyperlinks, right? And is it only about partnerships between two companies? And so what we did is we looked at how many of these hyperlinks go outside of the B2B context, how many of those go to organizations, how many of those go to governmental institutions or educational centers, right? We also mentioned the collaboration between universities and companies in the industry. And what we see is that at least 1/5 of the hyperlinks that we have collected go to a website where the domain ends in educ, gov, or org, so organizations, governments, or education, which is already an indication that these hyperlinks are much more than just a marketing tool or just B2B relationships. Another thing that we did is we looked at how many of these hyperlinks are actually reciprocal. How many of these hyperlinks go both ways? And again, only for the in-sample hyperlinks that we studied in this particular study, again, at least 1/5 of those were reciprocal, manifesting that this is maybe more than just some companies showing that, oh, we work with this other company once and we're going to put it on our website, but it is a mutual acknowledgement of that partnership. And I think that you can expand on that, right? You can go even beyond that. But for example, what you could do is, where do you find those hyperlinks? What we did is we scraped the first 20 pages of each website. And of course, a hyperlink that is placed on the very first page, on the home page, is much more prominent than a hyperlink that might be placed on the 20th page. This again might be indicative of the quality of the signal that you're picking up and the interpretation that you make of it. As I said, I think there is these technical ways to deal with noise and how to handle it. And then there is more, let's call it complementary ways by using, for example, the community innovation survey data. There's also indicators in there, such as how many of the companies have engaged in collaboration for innovation. That is something we have looked at and correlated that as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we will continue by giving the floor to Professor Dr. Gabi Odekerke-Schröder, Customer-Centric Service Science at Maastricht University and Secretary of this committee. Gabi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, dear Eric, first of all, I want to extend my congratulations to a wonderful interdisciplinary and I think even transdisciplinary work. Also to your supervisory team, which is also truly interdisciplinary. And I'm very pleased that after a bachelor's in economics and business economics and a master's in business intelligence and smart services, you landed in the Department of Marketing and Supply Chain Management. And the reason why I say that is because I think your excellent narrative today and your outstanding presentation, which makes your rather complicated thesis very accessible to people like myself, shows that Sam's experiences are experiences that we will remember, and that also shows how you master your content. So congratulations on this part of your achievement. My question relates to your chapter 3 and your impact statement in chapter 6, where you argue that it becomes more and more essential to distinguish authentic knowledge from AI-generated noise, and we already briefly discussed that in your conversation today. But my question is, If this is the case, and our students in higher education use large language models more and more, I think some of them would not be even able to graduate without ChatGPT. Could be a hypothesis. What is the implication? What is the impact of your thesis on higher education? How can we benefit from it? What are the main challenges, and how can we mitigate those? I look forward to your reflection.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words and the reflection of how I ended up in this wonderful department. And also thank you very much for your question, and I think it is a very valid and a very important question in the face of AI and large language models. What should we do about it, and how can this thesis contribute to it? And I think that there is two ways that this thesis not only applies to the startup founders, entrepreneurs, and academics that I've mentioned, but also to industries such as education. And that is that we all need to understand, first of all, the challenges that we are facing. Information overload, the ocean that I have been showing is just expanding, especially with the advent of AI and large language models. So we all need to be equipped with skills and understanding of what is happening and skills to deal with it. And I think that this thesis makes a contribution in that direction by showing how different methodologies, right? We don't just use one single methodology across all 4 chapters where we deal with web textual data. We use different methodologies, showing how these different methodologies already can contribute and equip you to be a better knowledge scout. We start off fairly simple with just keyword detection in the Reddit paper, where we look at advice, seeking, and giving. We do a slightly more advanced methodology in the Glassdoor paper with a large language model, actually, and so on and so forth. So that is the first contribution that it makes, giving us the tools and the understanding of how to pick out this digital signals and the knowledge signals that we are most interested in. Of course, if we now look at, for example, the word advice, we will pick it up whether the content is AI generated or not. So there is a certain role of authenticity that we need to find. And I think the way to do that, and we took a step in that direction in this particular chapter and on the Reddit paper, where we distinguish between advice that only says, you should do it, this and this, but we also looked at advice that said, in my experience, from what I've done, from my journey as a startup founder at the very beginning. And I think that in the future, those particular digital signals or disclosed information will become more and more important. And how does that apply to the educational context? I think in the educational context, we will need to get to a point where we also more testing personal knowledge, information, and experiences of students. So not just testing factual information and factual memorization of information, basically, but testing for authenticity and true understanding of matters. And if I may, I want to briefly reflect on my academic journey that you have highlighted. Doing my bachelor studies in economics and business economics, I had an oral exam in econometrics, which I didn't expect, but which was a true test of my knowledge, of my understanding of the matter. Similar to the situation here today. Back then it was just a room, me and the professor himself, but it was a testing of my understanding of the matter. And I think we in education, in the face of a digitized society, more connectivity and more information overload, we need to maybe revise some educational approaches that we have to test for that kind of understanding. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, and I would also like to understand very concretely, what does this mean for SBE's faculty board, department head, course coordinator? What should we do tomorrow morning or Monday morning?
Tomorrow you should enjoy your weekend.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
No, I think very concrete steps, and I mean the discussions have been going on for the past 2 years, right? At the beginning, many universities took an approach of saying we ban AI and large language models, but I don't think that is really the solution. We need to embrace it and we need to know how to handle it. If we know that students generate texts using these tools, but not only generate text using these tools, but also find information in these tools, right? I would set a hypothesis that many students nowadays go to ChatGPT to understand an economic model rather than opening the book that they were given, right? And if we understand that this is changing how students acquire knowledge, we need to adapt our teaching approach and educational approach. And I think the best way to do it is on a human-to-human interaction. It's on a personal level. And I think Maastricht University, with the setup of the tutorials, gives us the opportunity for that. Put away any digital devices, engage in personal and authentic conversations with the students, really saying, do you understand this? Do you understand why this model predicts what it predicts? Do you understand what this implies? Do you understand the significance of a p-value, right? Without testing pen and paper, without testing digital exams, but really engage in human-to-human interaction. And I think that, as I said, Maastricht University offers the context and the environment to do so. It's certainly a difficult task, but that would be my recommendation to the boards and to you to do on Monday morning.
Yeah, thank you. So it's not only about teaching, but also about the assessment in particular then. Huh? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We're happy to have your proposition in our email box on Monday morning, 9 a.m. to start.
Sure.
Just out of pure interest, and I'm not meddling and I'm not a member of the opposition, but how would you include it in the proposition? How would that include peer learning and peer assessment with respect to knowledge authenticity?
By peer learning and peer assessment, you mean that students evaluate students, essentially? I think, to be honest, to a certain degree, Maastricht University does that already, right? Because you have a setting in a tutorial where there's a discussion leader who asks questions and engages the tutorial group in a discussion, and collectively you build up the knowledge and understanding. So I think to a certain degree that is already being done. Now to take it maybe a step further, and I guess that's what your question implies. We need to be aware of the fact that ChatGPT and other large language models are not only used by one student, but by the vast majority, right? And there's two scenarios that can unfold. All of these students type in the same prompt and get the same information. So they're all on the same level and have the same understanding, and the conversation and also the assessment will result in harmony, essentially. But there's also a situation where students might twist and turn their prompts slightly differently from others and get very different information, which can already be very basic, such as how many R's in strawberry, but also more elaborate, such as explain the solo growth model, for example. And I think if we end up in that second situation where everybody uses a different prompt and gets some different information out of ChatGPT and other large language models, peer-to-peer evaluation will, well, result in the opposite than harmony, right? Because students will be convinced that the truth that they have received from a large language model is the absolute truth. And that is the very fundamental problem with these tools, right? Because ultimately they are, to a certain degree, tools that want to attract customers. We're not just users, we are not just individuals typing in a prompt, but we're customers to OpenAI, to Claude, to any other company. And they want to keep us keep us on the platform, right? So they give you the information that you expect. And that would, so I would refrain from peer-to-peer evaluation, to be honest.
Okay.
I hope this answers your question.
We'll read more about this in your proposition at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
You're clearly in your comfort zone now. Let me take you out of that comfort zone again to give the floor to Dr. Thomas Moos, Head of Data Science Efficiency at Red Bull, Germany. The floor is yours.
Austria. Austria, yes. Dear candidate, dear Eric, first and foremost, let me congratulate you on your impressive and very fine work. I very much enjoyed reading your dissertation, but I didn't travel to Maastricht only to make your compliments. I also brought a question with me. And the question is about chapter 3, why should we hire you? In this chapter, you focus your analysis on startups. And in startups, you have this standardized and very useful event of early financing that you can use as your dependent variable. If you want to generalize your approach and your findings to different types of companies like Red Bull, for example, how would you approach that? Is there a way that you can take your research and show companies like Red Bull what a perfect, optimal hiring strategy could be, and what types of or what type of people they should look for?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words. Thank you for coming all the way to Maastricht, and also thank you very much for your question. And I think it's a very valid question, and it will touch upon slightly what I have discussed in one of my previous answers about the matter that context, of course, is important, right? As you rightly said, we are looking at a situation where the goal is to receive early stage financing, and so we are looking at a specific time frame and a time window. Of course, with more established companies such as Red Bull, that time window is not given or might look very different, right? You don't just think ahead to the next financing round, you think ahead to the next 10, 20 years or so. While I would expect the patterns that have been uncovered to be most definitely different, I still think that the approach that was taken using this web data analytics approach with time series clustering, but also the mechanisms that we have uncovered, that certain recruitment patterns are more favorable to any kind of outcome that you're pursuing, will manifest themselves also in the context of a major company. So that the mechanisms definitely generalize, yet the context will determine the magnitude of these mechanisms. Now, if I think about the example of Red Bull, I think it's better to think of it as smaller department groups or teams that will be composed to exercise and to fulfill a certain task. We can take data science efficiency as an example, but also within data science efficiency, you, for example, have the sports analytics team. The task of the sports analytics team is very, very specific. And so you can hire not just to drive the sales of cans, which would be the ultimate goal of Red Bull, but to achieve this more granular objective of this one specific team. So I think to generalize and to take those findings to major companies, the best way to do so is break up the company in smaller teams and then adjust the hiring pattern according to that, because the ultimate output variable will differ. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And maybe a small follow-up question.
Pleasure.
Could you think of like some kind of experimental setup or study that you could perform with established companies that shows what kind of hiring patterns, recruitment strategies are potentially superior to others?
Yeah, most definitely. And to be honest, I think I would take the same approach as we did now, right? Right now we focused on startups within the US, but you could extend that same web scraping of Glassdoor to any other company, right? And basically, the advantage that you have is that on Glassdoor you have historic data available, so you could go back to the very beginnings of a company or the beginnings of Glassdoor actually, to start scraping that data and see how the patterns evolved, because you can use the very same classification algorithm that we used to distinguish between knowledge, skills, and other motivations. And you could even add skills that are specific to the context of Red Bull or the task that you're trying to fulfill. So I would take the very same approach, but just extend the time horizon. And say up to this point, what way have we been doing? And the advantage of that would be that you could do a time series analysis also with performance indicators, right? You could just look at, okay, how many, let's take a very, very simple example, how many cans have we been selling in the last 10 years, and what has our recruitment pattern looked like during those 10 years? Is there any correlation between the two of them? Of course, there's many more mechanisms and potential moderators and mediators available, but it would be an approach to run a first analysis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lots of work over the weekend. Second proposition for Red Bull.
I'm on holidays.
Well, fortunately, you have your paranymphs to help you out here. Continuing the opposition, we give the floor to Professor Dr. Jan van den Brakel, Centraal CBS.nl, niet Denmark. He also the chair of survey methodology. So hold on, at Maastricht University and statistics, Netherlands. Yes, the floor is yours, Jan.
Thank you. Yeah, esteemed candidate, dear Eric, or maybe dear Sam, congratulations again with finalizing an impressive thesis. I have two questions. One concerns the statistical analysis of Chapter 2, and if time allows, I have also a question about Chapter 4. But starting with Chapter 2, where you study the effect of self-disclosure of startups on advice seeking and advice giving. You do some kind of panel regression because you have multiple observations within a sample of firms. You allow for that by modeling the firms with a fixed effect component. But you only have 2 observations within each firm, if I understood correctly. And doesn't this approach make the model very prone for overfitting or modeling random error? Why not choose for a model where you model the firms as a random component, as a form of regularization? That would allow for more degrees of freedom in your model building. And I think this is an important issue because you see, for example, that the effects of post-disclosure, which is the main variable of interest in table 2, it switches from sign if you add the explanatory variables bounding social capital or bridging social capital. And I think in the ideal case, you should include both variables in one model instead of in 2 separate models because they have such an impact on your variable of interest. So I anticipate now that you didn't do that because the model is already so saturated because of all these fixed firms effects. So the follow-up question is basically, did you try that to combine them in one model? And what is the effect? But yeah, the first question was basically, why a fixed effect for firms? And how sensitive is that for overfitting?
Sure.
Now we've got you.
Maybe. Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words, and also thank you very much for your question. And I think you're right to question the methodology that has been implied, but I think that there are certain reasons to it why we chose that way, but there's also more work that has been done. And I want to elaborate on both of them. The first reason why do we include fixed effects is because naturally you could ask whether those founders that decide to disclose their startup affiliation are in some way systematically different from others, right? Maybe they're at a different stage in their trajectory, maybe they have very different personality characteristics from those that don't disclose. And for some way to control for this, we went for this before and after comparison with fixed effects, and considered this a good first step to take to look at the effects of disclosure. Yet that's not where we stopped. We actually also ran the same analysis by looking at the trend of post-disclosure beyond the 3 posts that we currently consider. So are there any long-term effects? The issue with that is that in an ideal scenario, you would have all founders disclosing at the same time, sort of have a treatment and then compare the treatment group to a control group, right? But every founder has been disclosing at a different point in time. So the time component becomes very complex and you need to somehow normalize it across different founders. That also means that if we want to consider founders that have posted before and after and want to extend the time horizon to long term, the sample size shrinks even more, which is something we wanted to avoid because ultimately with this chapter and also with this thesis as a whole, we want to show the value in web data, especially going for bigger sample sizes, which is something that we have tried to do, yet keeping methodological rigor. But still, I think that, yes, there's other methodologies that could be tried, that could be tested, especially if we take into account long term. Something we also tried was to replicate this control and treatment group analysis by doing some sort of similarity analysis between founders that disclose and other users that don't disclose yet are active within the community, and that is work in progress. That is unfortunately not so easy because it's of course difficult to identify startup founders that don't disclose that they're startup founders. But sometimes the name gives it away, or there might be other indicators. Or you could look at those that disclose early on and those that disclose later on, and then compare those 2 groups. There's definitely other ways that we could have done. The fixed effect one was where we just wanted to control for potential bias pre and post within founders. I hope this answers your question.
Not really, but I think I stop here because time is running out and there is another opponent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please come back after the defense, because we'll not let him go like that. Okay.
With pleasure.
We continue the opposition by giving the floor to Dr. Nordine Essatki, Assistant Professor at UNU Merit of Maastricht University. Nordine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. And dear candidate, dear Eric, and if the Pro-Rector allows me, I have a slightly different question than I initially communicated. So I also congratulate you on a commendable piece of work. It's really impressive what you have done. My question is also on Chapter 4. We've discussed Chapter 4 extensively today. And I'm particularly interested in the novelty in terms of innovations. So you look at new to market and you look at new to firm innovations. And you found evidence for a inverted U-curve for new to market innovations, however, not for new to firm innovations, so the lesser novelty for the rest of the audience. However, the coefficients suggest a possible U-shape, though it is insignificant. This raises two issues, in my opinion. First, the question whether the functional form that you assume truly holds across all innovation types. And secondly, whether there are boundary conditions where density is strictly detrimental from the start. The reason I'm asking this is that from a conceptual standpoint, one could argue that under very high cognitive distance combined with weak appropriability regimes, the benefits of closure might vanish. You've discussed it a little bit in your initial presentation, which makes the relationship for new to firm innovations rather monotonic, negative, rather than curvilinear. So I was wondering whether you tested for monotonicity versus true curvature for these new to firm innovations, for example, by examining marginal effects or splines plots, and that perhaps the measurement noise is masking a different shape or a different relationship. And in relation to that, the follow-up question is, under which cognitive distance and appropriability regimes would you expect density to be harmful with, let's say, no left side of the inverted U-curve? Yeah.
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words, and also thank you very much for your question. I want to start at the end of your question, actually.
Okay.
About where there are situations where density is detrimental from the beginning in situations of very high cognitive distance. And I think it relates to a little bit what we have discussed before, where intellectual property protection is so important. Because I think that innovations, product developments, and other developments that get patented where intellectual property is particularly high require this recombination of different knowledge sources. So they require this high cognitive distance, essentially. So we already have that situation. But at the same time, you don't want to be in a situation of too high density, right? Because often these products and innovations are very, very specific. They're very tailored to certain cases. And so the involvement of more people makes things much more complicated, right? And the involvement of more firms makes
We'll give you another 1-2 minutes. Go on, please.
With pleasure. And so the involvement of even more companies makes things much more complicated. So you want to avoid a situation of where you have high connectivity and high density. So I definitely think that there is a scenario where you would have a sort of just downward sloping curve. Now to your second question about the different effects for new to market and new to firm innovation, I don't know if I should also, yes, okay. If I remember correctly, your question was mostly about that there is also this certain U-shaped curve, yet insignificant, correct? And why that might be?
Yeah, so and it could perhaps be, let's say, a different relationship than a curvilinear curve. So that it is rather monotonic negative when it comes to new to firm innovations.
Yeah, most definitely, and I think that is something that can also theoretically be expected by just the type of knowledge that is being needed and leveraged for these different types of innovations, right? Well, with new-to-market innovation, it's mostly about recombining distant knowledge. With new-to-firm innovation, it's more about the existing knowledge that you already have internally. Or if you bring in external knowledge, it should be very easy to integrate, right? Because you want to make incremental steps rather than work on something complex and radical. So I think theoretically speaking, if we would look at, for example, integration of knowledge rather than just pure cognitive distance, it would be possible that you would expect a differently shaped curve.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If not, we will continue during the reception and later.
Sure.
But Mr. Erik Schaap, the time appointed for the defense of your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense today. I request that you and your company await the result of our deliberations and our return in this room. And this is today's cliffhanger. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Erik Schaap, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Dr. Erik Schaap, your promoter, Professor Dominique Maar, is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your superior to now take the floor.
Please all rise.
Thank you. Dear Eric, do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Erik Schaap, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by customs and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with a degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Dear Eric, dear Dr. Schaap, both of us are so proud and happy to stand here as your supervisors today to congratulate you and to look back on the last couple of years. So the two of us, we actually first met during your master thesis defense when you actually presented your work with a big smile and in full command of your topic, as you did also today. So I was very happy to also get the opportunity via Dominic and D3M to act as one of your supervisors. And throughout your PhD, you were really always in the lead. And that might sound normal, but I would really like to re-emphasize, as I think almost all members of the committee did, that your PhD is interdisciplinary, which brings a lot of challenges. It's not easy at all. But nonetheless, you embraced this role from the start in all of the meetings that we had from the start of your PhD, pitching ideas that you had, often from your little notebook that you brought along, and also saying that it was just an idea that you had. Well, they were never really just ideas, but they were great ideas, and they all led to chapters in your thesis.
And we think also it's not only an interdisciplinary, it's really a transdisciplinary effort, because you developed your own work. I mean, partly also independently of us. And what was great is you not only work across people, actually, or cross topic, but also across people. You speak the language. I mean, you brought, quantitative economics and marketing and supply chain together, which is probably one of the biggest, I think, challenge that you might also face at SBE. But you also brought a lot of different people together, and that is also what is very significant. In terms of your network analysis, you would see that there are a lot of knots, but not a lot of connections initially. Now people are also together. So I think by bringing people from different disciplines, practice, from statistics, I mean CBS, Red Bull, I think you also show that you bring a very different flavor to this entire work. And you also have to imagine that sometimes the talks that we had, I mean, were also in the same spirit. I mean, you came in, indeed, with a little red book, I mean, and put it down, the idea. But then you talked, I mean, first you talked maybe data and method. And then Ines and you, I mean, debating, I see that almost like ping pong flying by. And then we would go also to the theory and then the positioning, etc., and would also do that. And you would manage that. And we had a very good time, I mean, also, but also learning from each other. So having said that, another quality of, besides speaking to different, speaking different languages, is also your entrepreneurial spirit. Because you have done a lot, I mean, and now you see the end of it, I mean, but we're just actually reflecting also with the jury, there have been so many things on its way. Yes, you brought different authors together, you collaborated with CBS, you went to CBS too, I mean, the Copenhagen's. But there are many things that you might remember that actually have not worked out. You remember we went to Independer, spent there quite some time in Amsterdam at that. We tried to work with A.T. Kearney, we tried to work with the province of North Rhine-Westphalia, we tried to the University of Mannheim, we tried with some Luxembourgian newspaper, I done for data, I don't even remember anymore what. We tried to have working on the internationalization debate. We tried to do web scraping also of LinkedIn. And we stopped there because we realized at some point that probably it's illegal and some of us would need to go to prison for that. So I think there's a lot of things that would need to actually, that you also have done on its way. So what you do is, you actually, indeed, and I pick up some of the analogy that you have in your acknowledgement, is you knock on doors, but you also walk those doors. And that is what you do very, very well. And this is surely a skill that helps you also in your new job at Red Bull.
Yes, so as Dominic said, there was a lot done during your PhD, much more also than what actually appeared in all of your chapters. So you're extremely ambitious. And that also meant that actually already halfway through the PhD, you approached us because you wanted to do a research stay abroad, and preferably in New York City. Now, both of us, we really warmly supported the idea to do a research stay abroad, though I have to admit that personally, good luck crossed my mind when it came to the location. Why? Well, because nor Dominic nor I, we actually had connections to innovation researchers, right, in New York City, but that didn't matter. You made things happen, and I still don't know exactly how you made things happen other than you being you, but you went there for like 9 months. You had a wonderful time, both personally, because also, yes, it happened to be that Joël was also there in New York City, but also professionally laying the foundation for 2 more chapters in your PhD. And both Dominic and me, we were also very happy to see you back in Maastricht, to see how much you had grown as a person. So that was wonderful to see. So we said it already, right? Creativity, your entrepreneurial mindset, hard work, they all define you as a person. But possibly the trait that both of us would probably admire you most for is your resilience. Because there were several setbacks that you had to face along the way, personal losses, but also professional difficulties that come with interdisciplinary work, where we had so many rejections of many of the papers, even after very good revisions that you did. But you always kept on going. And actually, I do need my note now, because one of our colleagues, it was not Dominic, but one of our colleagues at SBE, they told me that in German you say, hinfallen, aufstehen, Krone richten und weitergehen. Well, Eric, no one does that with so much conviction, positive attitude and grace as you do. And that is truly remarkable, what both of us really admire so much in you. Also, in February, when you left in Maastricht, there was so much work to do. Your 3rd chapter had still quite a lot of work that needed to be done. The first project required revisions with additional complications because one of our co-authors passed away. In the meantime, one of your other chapters got rejected once more, but you kept on going and you delivered on time as we planned only a couple of months after, and that was truly impressive. Truly also Eric to do so, but not many would have done that way. We're also very happy to see you now at the SPORMS Performance Analytics of Red Bull. That's really also a dream job that came true for you, again with hard work and dedication. And both of us are very much looking forward to staying in touch professionally, but also personally, on a personal note, even in Salzburg, because I am a little bit jealous of the beautiful mountains, let's say, that surround you.
So that is leading us to the end. I mean, so we want to also thank you as a person, both from a perspective of the department, but also from SBE, because you contribute to the community. I mean, I even talked to finance, Martijn is in finance. It is across, I mean, the entire SBE, but of course also contributing, being always available if there's something to be done, doing a workshop, being second reader. These are a lot of sounds, maybe small things, but Eric would always, I mean, say yes. And that is something that we really very much appreciate, the friendliness, but also the helpfulness. And it's contributing to this entire cohort of wonderful SBE PhD students. So with that, I mean, all the best, I mean, to you, your family. Indeed, a wonderful life, I mean, in Salzburg. I think Salzburg is a little bit like Maastricht. I mean, if you have real mountains, if you replace maybe André Rieu with Mozart, I mean, and you don't have carnival. I mean, that's it. So you might come back for the carnival, no, but we're really, really proud. I mean, we both together, but you did a fantastic job, and we're looking forward to more collaboration and looking forward what kind of cool stuff you also do in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Schaap, let me on behalf of Maastricht University and its community congratulate you on your achievement and thank you for all your contributions to this same community. Let me also explicitly thank the members of your family and the members of the clique of your friends, because without their support and understanding, you would probably not be here like you are standing here today. So thank you for all close to Eric Schaap. And let me also thank your two wonderful paranymphs, Martijn and Roberta Di Palma, Martijn Stroom, Roberto Di Palma, for being here and doing a wonderful job. I can only close this ceremonial academic session, which I do, inviting you to the reception. We have a first 5 minutes out. We'll take some pictures, but please go on to the reception hall. We will find you there in 5 or 6 minutes. Thank you very much.